Fair warning, my sweet, sweet angel baby Winnie is in rare form. Something's going on outside and she is just mad as fire about it. So, hey, sweet girl. Sweet girl. Hopefully she'll settle down and not bark. And then I had the door open and I saw this giant spot, well, giant in my standards, spider on my glass door. And so I'd rather have a bear come in here than a spider. So whew, hang on, let's see if we can get through this one. All right, for topic two, we're going to talk about leasing versus buying and the importance of insurance. Okay. So, I would say most of us are drivers at this point, so we have a general understanding of some of this, but if not, that's fine. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this section, but I do want to at least cover it. So, leasing. Let's first understand what leasing is. So, leasing is the practice of paying a specified amount of money for a specified period of time. I think I have a typo in there. That should say 4. Hold tight. 4. A specified period of time. Good Lord. 4. Bless my heart, for the use of a product. So typically you think like a car. You could lease other things, but like cars and apartments, you can get leases for those. Okay. So it's the practice of paying a specified amount of money for a specified period of time for the use of a product. Okay. So when you're thinking of like a car, you can think of a lease as almost a long-term rental agreement. Okay. So you may have this lease for several years versus a few days having a car rented on a vacation. Okay. So it's a long-term rental agreement. There are advantages and definitely disadvantages to having a lease. Okay. So sometimes people will get a lease instead of buying a car because the monthly payment is more affordable. So one advantage to leasing is it can be a lower monthly payment. So I'm a big fan of like the Real Housewives of like whatever city. So they had all, Orange County, Beverly Hills, New Jersey, New York, whatever. And I've noticed a lot of those people will have leases on these like super, super expensive cars. And I think it's because maybe they can't really afford to buy this super, super expensive car, so they'll get a lease. So it can just be an affordable way to get a car in some cases. So if your financial circumstances don't allow you to buy a car at that time, a lease is a potential option. Okay. Some people really like to get a lease because they like to have the newest, latest model. So you can upgrade every few years. So you can upgrade every few years. So you may have a lease for a few years, and then when your lease ends, you can get the latest, greatest, newest car out there. Okay. You have lower repair costs in some cases. So lower repair costs because I guess leases will sometimes come with warranties or different kind of agreements on a lease. So warranties for leases. So if you have some kind of a warranty on your lease, you may not be responsible for certain just maintenance type repairs on the vehicle. Okay. And then you don't have to worry about a resale value. That is something that when you own a car, if you know that you're not going to keep the car long term, you've got to worry about making sure your car has a good resale value down the road. So no worries about resale value. Now, some of us schmucks that have a Lego addiction and a Diet Coke addiction, we're going to drive our Toyota Corolla until the wheels fall off. We don't care about having the latest and greatest, but let's say these things are of concern to you. A lease is an option. Okay. Now, disadvantages to lease. Once your lease has ended, you don't have a car. Okay. So, in some cases, in the length of the lease, you could have bought a car. It may not be the same caliber car, it may be a lower value car, but you could have potentially bought a car in that time frame depending on your situation. So that's kind of a bummer. You pay, thousands of dollars over the course of a few years, but you don't get to keep the car. So no car at the end of the lease. Okay. Another issue with leases is they can have mileage like caps. So you may have like a 3 or 4 year lease, let's say, and they could say, okay, you have a 3 or 4 year lease, but you can only drive the car so many miles. So then what happens is if you drive the car more miles over that time frame, you end up having to pay penalties. So mileage penalties. Whereas if you buy the car, it doesn't matter how much you drive it, it's your car, all right? You can also sometimes have wear and tear fees. So even though you may have this car for several years, they still want a decent car back when you turn in the lease, right? So you can have fees for wear and tear. Okay, now of course, if you have a car for 4 or 5 years, there's going to be some expected wear and tear, but anything in excess of what is expected, you could get hit with some fees for that. Okay, you also end up with continuous payments. Okay. So you have a lease, let's say again, it's 4 or 5 years. Well, the lease ends, you have to turn in the car. So then what are you going to do? You're going to have to either buy another car or get another lease. So you can end up just having payments for years and years and years. Whereas if you can get yourself in a situation where you could buy a car, you may pay for that car for 4 or 5 years, but then the car is yours and you could. Like this girl right here, once she gets that Toyota Corolla paid off, she's driving it till the wheels fall off. She can't wait to not have a car payment. Okay. So you could get in a situation where you just end up in this like endless cycle of leases and you never own a car and you just continue to have a car payment. Whereas if you can get in a situation where you could potentially buy a car and be content to keep that car, then you can get into a situation where you no longer have a car payment. So that's really sometimes exciting. Another issue is depreciation. If you buy a car, then you have a car that is going to like it's going to reduce in value over time. So you could kind of end up with a car where depreciation is an issue if you're buying it. So with a lease, you don't have to worry about that. So no worries about depreciation. And depreciation is just the natural lowering of the value of something that you own. So things tend to depreciate over time. All right. And cars tend to depreciate. Okay. Like if you have a car, 10 years, it's going to be a more beat up car than you had when you started with. There's wear and tear on the engine and so forth. So cars depreciate. All right. Now, importance of insurance. Okay. So you have to, in North Carolina, you have to have insurance to drive a car, period. Okay. And there's reasons for this. All right. You are not only responsible for you and your passengers and your vehicle, you are responsible for everybody else on the road in some way, shape, or form. Maybe not financially, but you do need to be cautious and terrible things can happen. And, we need insurance. Okay. So here are some things that you need to know about insurance. Okay. So just really some definitions here that we're going to go through. Obviously, we understand that insurance is there if there's a major issue with your car, like some kind of major repair, it might be insured. If you're in a car accident, it might be insured. If you're in a hailstorm, it could possibly be something that insurance could cover to fix that. If you're in a storm and a tree falls on your car and crushes it, you could potentially get those repairs paid for with insurance. So we understand that side of insurance, okay? Now, some other components to insurance, we also have bodily injury liability. Okay, so if you have bodily injury liability, this covers the cost of lawsuits if someone is injured or killed in an accident in which you were at fault. So that's kind of what I mean by like you're sort of responsible for others on the road too. So if you are in an accident and it is your fault, you could be sued and be liable for paying damages to someone else that you injured. Okay. There's also property damage liability. This covers damage to other cars. Okay. So we have the bodily injury liability where that pays potential legal, like if you're sued, this pays for the injuries to the person. And then property damage liability covers damage to other cars or property. So you're in a bump up on the interstate and you damage somebody else's car, this would potentially or would likely cover the damage to their car. But imagine you're driving down the road, a spider climbs in your window and is crawling on you. I would be inclined to lose my mind. So imagine you're like, "Wah!" and you drive into somebody's mailbox and their fence. Okay. It could also cover property to someone else's property, maybe physical property, not just their car. Okay. So this covers damage to others' cars and properties from negligent operation of your vehicle. We also have collision coverage. This pays for damage or loss to your car if you're in an accident. So your insurance will certainly cover damages to someone else's car, but if you pay for collision coverage, it'll pay for damage to your car. And then comprehensive coverage protects your car from perils such as fire, theft, falling objects, acts of nature, and collision with an animal. Okay, so these are different types of coverage that you can pay for. Again, in North Carolina, you have to have insurance, period, no questions. All right. So that is the importance of insurance. Okay. Again, it's not just to fix your car in different situations, it's potentially to fix other people's cars if or their physical person if you are at fault. Okay. Now, with that said, let's scoot on over to talking about buying new cars versus buying used cars. So far we've talked about leasing, advantages and disadvantages to leasing. Now let's talk about, okay, you're going to buy a car, but are you going to buy a new one or a used one? Okay. So lots of advantages and disadvantages to both of these. So let's just start filling in some of these. If you buy a new car, a lot of times new cars come with warranties. So like you could have a warranty on your transmission. If your transmission goes kafooey in a certain amount of time, it could be covered. So an advantage here would be warranties. Okay. All right. And then the latest technology. So if you buy a brand new car, let's say you really want all the bells and whistles, you want the fancy car. Buying the new car, you're getting kind of the latest technology, okay? So if that's something that interests you, knock yourself out. So you get the latest technology. Okay. If you're buying a new car, you also sometimes have the option to customize. So if you're like buying a brand new car, like a friend of mine years ago, she went through a little marital issue and she was going to really just do something nice for herself. So she was like, I'm buying myself a car. And she bought herself a customized car. She picked the interior color. She picked the paint color. She picked the add-ons, right? She got a lot of customization options because she was buying a new car. Now, sometimes you just buy a new car and it's, hey, that one on the lot, but other times, depending on how you go about this, you could do some customization. So if that is important to you, that could potentially be a perk to buying a new car. You could also have potentially lower interest rates, okay? The idea behind this is if you've got a new car, it's less likely to not make it through the life of the loan. So let's say you have a 5-year loan. The lender wants to make sure that they have that car to take from you if you default on your loan. Okay. So if you have a newer car, it's more likely to stand up during the life of that loan. So if you had an old beater car, it might just die and go kafooey before the end of the loan, and that's a risk for the lender. So a new car, there's less risk to the renter or to the lender. So they're like, hey, you know what? We might give you a little bit of a lower interest rate because your car is brand new. Okay. And we know that if you default on your loan between now and 5 years from now, we got a new car that we can take from you. All right. No prior owner. Okay. By having no prior owner, you know the history of the car. Okay. And that's an important thing. Okay. Now, some disadvantages, I'll kind of split this. So some disadvantages is you have higher depreciation. Oh, my dog is gonna go nuts. I hear a dog barking. God bless. You all hear her? She is mad. Okay, so when you have a brand new car, it's gonna depreciate. Miss Winnie June is giving her mama some attitude. Go to mama's bed. She's mad. All right, let's go back to the worksheet. Okay, so we were talking about disadvantages to buying a new car, higher depreciation. The newer something is, the more rapidly it's going to depreciate. And we've all seen those commercials from days gone by that it depreciates the minute you drive it off the lot. So you do have that risk. It's gonna decline in value rapidly at the beginning. Okay. You can also get the latest tech. So that was one of the advantages. However, a disadvantage is sometimes with the latest tech because it's new, it's more pricey to repair. A friend of mine, she sent her kids off to college, different friend than the one that had the marital issues. But anyway, this other friend, she had sent her kids off to college and she's like, you know what? I've had a mom car for years. I'm going to get myself, like a empty nester mom car. So she got herself an electric vehicle and then the battery died and it cost a fortune to fix. Luckily, it was under warranty, but it was a huge, huge expense because batteries on these electric cars are very, very pricey. Okay. So even though you have potentially the latest tech, sometimes the latest tech can be expensive to fix. So expensive repairs And then you have so higher repair costs. You sometimes have a longer time to pay it off. So if you have this brand new car, it's going to cost more, and so you may not be able to swing a 4-year loan. You may have to get like a 6-year loan just because you can't afford the payment on this brand new car. So potentially longer time to pay off. And then because you're dealing with a brand new car, it's going to have higher sales tax and higher insurance. So higher sales tax and insurance. Okay, if you're driving a $50,000 car, it's going to cost a little bit to insure that because if it's in a wreck, it's going to cost more to fix that. Okay, now some advantages and disadvantages to buying a used car. So, what's really nice is if you can get a new used car. So, it's not brand new, but maybe it's like 2 or 3 years old. So, it's still pretty flashy, it's still pretty new, but it's not got the high brand new value to it. So, some advantages would be lower purchase price. Slower depreciation. That main depreciation, like the minute you drive it off the lot, it's going to depreciate. You don't have to worry about that. All right, depreciation. I have no idea if I spelled that right. I don't even care at this point. My dog is ready to start barking again. I can tell it. Insurance, if your car's a little bit older, the insurance might not be quite as expensive, so lower insurance cost. And then you can sometimes get shorter loans. Because you're dealing with a used car, it may not cost as much, so you might be able to afford that 4-year loan versus the 6-year loan. So potentially shorter loans. Okay, some disadvantages to buying used, limited or no warranty. So new cars will sometimes come with like a warranty for so many years. Like if something falls apart in a, kind of a shorter time frame, they're like, hey, that's our goof. Like if this thing died in 2 years and it should have lasted 20, we're going to cover the cost for that. So a lot of things are under warranty for a new car, but by the time it's a used car, there's no warranty or there's a very limited warranty. Sometimes, depending on the age of the car, you can have higher maintenance cost. Now, this is not generally going to be the case for a newer used car, but if you get a car that's 15 or 20 years old, things start to just fall apart and need to be replaced. Okay, so depending on the age of the car, there could be potentially higher maintenance. You also have an uncertain history. I remember this was several years ago. I don't remember which hurricane it was, but it was one of these big coastal hurricanes. There was this big issue with cars that had flooded being sold, and the history, like people weren't being told that they had a car where the interior had flooded. I don't remember, this was several, like I was probably high school or college at the time, but that was like a big issue. They were trying to like scam these people by selling them these great used cars, but they had been in this horrible, horrible flood, right? So you do have an uncertain history. You don't know what all has happened to that car, depending on how you buy this car. You don't know what's been replaced, what issues the car may have. So there is that. And then you also have fewer choices for features. But, that's not really an issue for some people, just kind of depends. Okay. So that is advantages and disadvantages to leasing, some information about insurance, and advantages and disadvantages to buying new versus used. So let's look at an example here. Okay. So example 2 says, suppose that you're thinking about buying a car and have narrowed your choices down to 2. The first choice is a new car, which is going to cost 29,000 and it's going to be financed with a 5-year loan at 6.18%. The second option is a used car. It's a 2-year-old model, so it's pretty new, so it's going to be in good shape. It's going to cost you 24,000, and again, you have a 5-year loan, but you do have a slightly higher interest rate at 7.5%. So let's do some calculation here, and I'm going to try to go through these pretty quickly. Okay, we've already done just the basic PMT calculation, so we're going to do that again. So remember, it is PMT equals P, the amount you're borrowing, times R over N. N is typically going to be monthly because we usually do a monthly payment. And then you have 1 minus 1 plus R over N to the negative N times T power. So that's our PMT formula. Okay. I just like breathed in so just like gave myself like a hiccup or something. God bless. When it gets late at night and I make these videos, you never know what's going to happen. All right, so part A says find the monthly payment and total interest for the new car option. Okay, so for the new car option, we're borrowing $29,000. That's going to be P. We have a 5-year loan, so T is 5. We're definitely looking for a monthly payment. So N is 12, and then our interest rate is 6.18%. So we get PMT equals 29,000 times 0.0618. That's our 6.18%. We are looking for a monthly payment, so N is 12. We are going to divide that by 1 minus 1 plus 0.0618 over 12 raised to the negative 12 times, or the negative N times T, so negative 12 times 5, because we have a 5-year loan. All right, and because we've done several of these with the calculator and Desmos, I think for this example, I'm just going to do the calculator to save time since I've already kind of shown you how to do this formula in Desmos. So let's go to the calculator. Okay, so there's the calculator, and we want to go alpha y equals to get the fraction template. In the numerator, we've got a $29,000 car. We're going to multiply it by R over N, so 0.0618 divided by 12. In the denominator, we're going to go brackets right off the bat, so just parentheses, and then 1 minus brackets 1 plus 0.0618 divided by 12, so that's 1 plus R over N. We're going to go up to the superscript world, so caret, and we want negative. Remember, not minus, negative. This is the button beside the decimal point. So negative N times T, so 12 times 5. And then we want to put brackets around the whole denominator. So hit the right arrow, end your parentheses, and hit enter. So 2 decimal places, we would get $563.08. So let's go back to our worksheet. And we have, was it 563? Let me go back really. I think it's 563. So we have $563.08 per month. So that's our monthly payment for the new car. Now let's figure out how much interest we pay. So for interest, remember, we take how much we paid over the life of this loan. So that's going to be PMT times N times T, and we subtract how much we borrowed. So principal. All right, so we're going to get 563.08. We did that 12 times a year for 5 years. And we need to subtract what we borrowed, which was 29,000. And I'm just going to use the handheld again for this since it's just multiplication and subtraction. So let's see, 563.08 times 12 times 5. So for the life of this loan, we paid $33,784.80. We borrowed 29,000. The difference between these two is how much interest we ended up paying on the loan. So we paid $4,784.80 in interest alone. So unfortunately, that's the cost for these big purchases. You have a lot of interest that you end up paying. So I watch a lot of reality TV, and I'm not ashamed of it. But I remember the Duggars, remember 19 Kids and Counting? I think it was the mom, she would always say, save for new, but buy used. So if you can buy things in cash, that's ideal because then you don't have to pay this huge interest fee. So interest ends up being a lot. Now, again, the vast majority of us can't just go out and drop $29,000 on a car. Wouldn't that be nice? So we kind of just have to pay the interest, but just know the interest is quite a lot of money. All right, let's look at the used car option. Now, it's a newer used car. It's only 2 years old. The price of the car is $24,000. We again have a 5-year loan. This time the interest rate is 7.5%, and we're looking for monthly payments and interest. So PMT equals 24,000 times 0.075, so R divided by N, and then we're going to divide that by 12. The denominator is 1 minus 1 plus R over N, so 0.075 again, divided by 12. That's a 7. And then we're going to raise that to the negative N times T, so negative 12 times 5. And then we end the brackets. And let's go to the calculator and see what this monthly payment would be. All right, so the only thing that's really changing here is the interest rate. So I'm just going to go up here and grab this, well, and the amount we're borrowing. So I'm just going to grab this formula and then I'm going to type over what needs to change. So my interest rate changes. It's 7.5 or 7.5%. So I'm going to change 0.618 to 0.075. So that's going to be a 7.5. And then if you need to delete something, as long as your cursor is on it, if you go up here to the blue second button and go over two buttons, there's this DEL. That'll just delete a digit. So I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to go up to the numerator. I'm going to change the 6.18% to 7.5 again. So 0.075. I'm going to delete the 8. And then don't forget, we didn't borrow 29,000 this time. This time we borrowed 24. Now, you do not have to type over the old formula. Some people like to do this. Some people think it takes just as much time to type the formula. I don't care one way or the other. All right, so per month for this new or for this used car, we would be paying $480.91. Okay, just rounding two decimal places. So, all right, so we have $480.91 per month. Okay, and it should make sense that you're going to have a lower monthly payment because you borrowed less money. This car, the used car, was 24,000 versus 29. Yes, you had a higher interest rate, but it was still $5,000 cheaper. So let's figure out the interest. Remember, interest in this case equals the payment times how many times you made the payment times the number of years you made the payment, and then you want to subtract what you borrowed. So we would get, don't put a 5, 480. $480.91. We did this 12 times a year for 5 years, and then we want to subtract the 24,000 that we borrowed. So just using my handheld, let's see how much we paid out. 480.91 times 12 times 5. So for this car, for the life of the loan, we paid out $28,854.60. When we subtract what we borrowed, we are left with $4,854.60 in interest. $4,854.60 in interest. So what's really important here is, yes, the interest. The interest is important, but what is also important is the lifetime, like how much you actually paid over the course of this loan. So for the new car, we paid a total of $33,784.80. And then our interest was $4,784.80. For the used car, for the life of the loan, we paid out $28,854.60. And of course, we paid out less. We borrowed less. Okay. So there's kind of two things to look for: how much you paid out over the life of the loan and how much interest you paid. So in this case, we paid out $4,854.60 in interest. So which one is cheaper? Well, it kind of depends on how you think about this. For the new car, we actually paid a little bit less in interest. Okay. Very little. Let's see what the difference is. So this is kind of what Part C is asking you. So let's look at just interest for the new car, plus or minus interest for the used car. So in this case, we actually spent more in interest for the used car. We had a higher interest rate, and that's just kind of the cost of buying these big, huge things. So for the used car, we had $4,854.60 in interest. For the new car, we only had $4,784.80 in interest. Now, yes, the life of the loan, we paid out more for the new car, but that makes sense because the new car cost more than the used car. But let's really look at the interest costs. So 4854.6 minus 4784.8. $69.80. So in the used car versus the new car, for the used car, you actually spend almost $70 more in interest. Now, this is $70 over the course of 5 years, which may not make a whole lot of sense, but you still save a good bit of money at the end of the day. So if we look at just the lifetime of the loan, so loan for the new minus loan for the used, let's look at how much you actually save overall. Okay, so by buying the used car, you spent only $28,854 and some change. The new car, however, was $33,784.80. Let's find the difference in those two, and we can finally determine how much more the new car really costs. So we would take 33,784.80 minus 28,854.6. 28, 54. So the new car, even though it was really $5,000 more after you take into account the fact that you paid a little bit more in interest for the used car, the new car was $4,930.20 more than the used, which might feel a little weird because remember the new car was 29,000, the used car was 24, but when you take into account the interest and how the interest rate was higher on the new or on the used car, you're really only $4,930.20 more for the new car than the used car. So if you see a question like this on a test, a lab, anything like that, I'm looking for you just to really think about these two loans. There's not necessarily like a right or wrong answer. It depends on the person. Some of you may really want the new car, and that's great. Okay, the new car is going to cost more, but it actually ended up being a teeny tiny bit cheaper as far as interest is concerned. Some of us, maybe we just can't afford the new car and we have to get the used car. That's also great. You pay a little bit more in interest, but at the end of the day, you still pay almost $5,000 less overall. Okay, so when I have a compare the monthly payments and interest for your two purchases, just really talk about the differences. You could do exactly what I did here, just use some words to explain. Okay. Almost done with this section. For the next video, we're just going to talk about fuel costs, which is going to be super fast.